I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in the wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Brandon's lost in a wonderland of confusion. Just saying.
Rippin' Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rippin' Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Coming to you from a secret cave, hidden deep within the wilderness. This is the Darkwolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. and we are broadcasting live from a secret cave hidden deep within the wilderness of Tennessee. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup. We're tearing through the atmosphere, and we're tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, February 24th, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Folks, tonight we are discussing a very, very important topic for this day and age, and that is, of course, the topic of treacherously treasonous traitors. A traitor is defined as one who betrays another's trust or is false to an obligation or duty, or one who commits treason. And I believe everyone on our list this evening has, at the very least, committed treason. And we're going to talk about all those here in just a moment, but first, let's go ahead and see who all we have out here in our YouTube chat rooms, both on the DarkWolf's Den Show and the Rippin' Rabbit Hole YouTube channels. How you guys doing over here tonight? Like JoJo's with the waving of the hand. Glad to see you, JoJo's. Always a pleasure. As well as, hey, Jay. Glad to see you, Jay. Says, let's go, Brandon. Well, can't disagree with that. Let's go, Brandon. Maggie's, my grandson in the background. Maggie's A says, oh yeah, U.S. trucks. That's right, honk, honk. Raider champion, got to take care of some things, but we'll be listening in the background. Glad to have you here, Raider. Sandy B says, hi, everyone. Hi, Sandy B. Who else we got here? Dominic Frosty. Glad to see you, Dom. It's been quite a while, my friend. Errol Taylor in the house also on this freedom-loving Thursday night. And, of course, guys, you know we have a very special celebration coming up on March 20th, the Freedom Flame celebration over here on the freedomflame.com. You can get more information. That's thefreedomflame.com, THEFREEDOMFLAME.com. As you see, we have it coming up once again, March 20th, 2022, the 5th year celebration here on the channel of the Freedom Flame, the 67th anniversary of the Freedom Flame. We have exactly 23 days, 1 hour, 54 minutes, and 210 seconds left. So exactly 23 hours, 1 day, and 54 minutes to go till we get to celebrate the Freedom Flame with the special we have coming up and celebrate freedom as a whole. Let's try to rekindle the flames of freedom with every chance we get, folks, and live so free that even our very existence is a halt against authoritarianism and destructiveness. But, folks, I am so glad to see all of you here, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm very excited to keep up with the Freedom Flame. Do make sure that you come on over to thefreedomflame.com. Now, folks, without any further ado, let's carry on here. Oh, JoJo's says, let's go, Brandon, FJB, FYT, and honk, honk. Like, I absolutely love it. And, of course, if you are joining us on YouTube or around the world on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, or even on the replay on BitChute or Rumble, we're glad to have every last one of you guys along for the ride. That's right. Also, by the way, if you are on BitChute or Rumble, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and hitting that subscribe button, that would really help me out a lot over there, guys. And of course, before we can dive too deep into the topic, we have two more fun little segments to do. The first of which we call Today in History. Fitting with our theme this evening, on this day in 1944, the Minister of War, Juan Perón, leads a coup in Argentina, another traitor. And that is today's segment of Today in History.
Say what?
Our quote of the day today, folks, comes from Edward Snowden. He says, and I quote, "Being called a traitor by Dick Cheney is the highest honor you can give to an American," end quote. And we know Cheney himself being a horrible traitor to this country. And that is today's segment of
Say what?
Dick Cheney calling you a traitor would be like Hillary Clinton or even traitorous Trudeau calling you a traitor. That would definitely be a compliment in my book, coming from slime bags like that. And we've seen the traitorous actions going on across the world in the last couple years. All of these leaders that seem to have turned on their people for sake of the WEF and other different organizations in which they are showing their loyalty instead of their own people. And of course, in history, they are not the first or the last people to be treasonous, like our first story this evening, which takes us back a long time ago.
Mir Jafar.
Jafar, you might recognize. That was the villain in Aladdin. However, I did not know that it was given that name based on a real incident. So you learn something new every day. Let's find out why Mir Jafar earned this treacherously treasonous title of traitor.
One man's ambition and lust for power would cause the downfall of a once mighty empire, resulting in the domination and plunder of an entire subcontinent by a foreign nation. A single act of betrayal on the battlefield over 250 years ago in 1757, changing the course of world history and leading to the name of the man responsible still being synonymous with treachery to this day.
And as I mentioned a moment ago, in Aladdin, the court wizard, if you will, that tricks the king is also named Jafar, the same one that is Aladdin's main enemy, the antagonist of the story, if you will. And it's interesting that this treacherous traitor was based on a real treasonously treacherous traitor.
The tale of greed, loyalty, and personal ambition, perfectly illustrating the danger of making a deal with the devil. Mir Jafar was a man with humble beginnings. However, after joining the army, he quickly rose through the ranks and won the confidence of the governor of Bengal, a powerful Indian province in the sprawling but rapidly declining Mughal Empire. Yet Mir Jafar was a man with lofty ambitions, and it didn't take long for him to become embroiled in plots to overthrow the governor, plots which were quickly discovered and led to his demotion and disgrace.
Most people would have given up after getting caught the first time, but not Jafar.
Mir Jafar was undeterred and still obsessed with seizing the position of governor for himself by any means necessary, eventually seeing the powerful British East India Company as a potential ally and tool to be used to make his dreams of power a reality.
The British East India Company is what we would define as the deep state today.
During the 18th century, the British East India Company was a privately owned corporation that had established trading posts across the now declining in power Mughal Empire, and although initially concerned with simply opening up trade opportunities in Asia, the riches it obtained allowed for it to pay for the recruitment and upkeep of its own private and independently controlled army.
An army that would grow at the time to be one of the biggest in the world, bigger even than the English Empire army at the time.
Relations between the company and the governor of Bengal had already deteriorated into a state of war, with the British now setting their sights on deposing their uncooperative enemy and replacing him with a man who would act as their puppet, giving them complete control over Bengal.
And we know that same setup happens today, as we definitely have a White House puppet, and pretty sure traitorous Trudeau is a puppet also of these same bankers, these same East India Company traitors that are from so long ago, this same deep state.
When Mir Jafar approached the company seeking their help, he must have seemed like the perfect candidate. a man willing to grant the British any and all demands they made in exchange for their help in establishing him as the sole ruler of Bengal. With the decisive battle against the current governor fast approaching, the governor's 50,000-strong Indian army greatly outnumbered the mere 3,000 soldiers under the command of the British colonel Robert Clive. However, much of the Indian army was under the command of disloyal generals. A deal was quickly struck between Mir Jafar and Colonel Clive, who was concerned about being so vastly outnumbered. In exchange for being given control over this new puppet state, Mir Jafar and his fellow conspirators agreed to keep their armies out of the coming battle, standing inactive on the sidelines when the fighting commenced, and in doing so greatly reducing the Indian army's strength.
To stand there and watch your own country get taken over because you refuse to fight for your country, that is truly treasonous.
In just 11 hours, the Indian army was defeated at the Battle of Plassey in June 1757, largely thanks to the failure of Mir Jafar to come to his governor's aid. Colonel Robert Clive honoured his side of the agreement and quickly crowned Mir Jafar as the new ruler of Bengal, granting the man his long-held dream of control over the throne, albeit now under the protection of the East India Company, with all the strings attached that such protection carried with it. Yet the victory won through his betrayal quickly revealed itself to be bittersweet. Although now the ruler of Bengal, Mir Jafar had to honour his earlier promise to pay massive bribes to Colonel Clive and other company officials, making them extremely wealthy men. Yet raising such funds and abiding by the seemingly never-ending demands made by the company left his kingdom in a state of financial ruin, and it soon became clear that the East India Company had plans to extend their control over all of India.
And as we know, the British ended up ruling the subcontinent of India for many, many years. And that is clearly a case of treasonous treachery by the original deep state of the time. But the next case, the case of Tokyo Rose, is not so clear-cut as to who the good guy and bad guys actually are.
Tokyo Rose. Born on the 4th of July 1916, Iva Tagore grew up like millions of other all-American girls, the daughter of Japanese immigrants who had moved to Los Angeles to seek a better life for their family. Encouraged by her father to be as westernized as possible, Iva was never taught to speak Japanese as a child and was raised as a Christian, joining the Girl Scouts at a young age, taking frequent piano lessons, and excelling at her grammar school before graduating from the University of California with a degree in zoology. The young woman looked set to live a normal life and fulfill her long-held dreams of becoming a doctor. However, a twist of fate would lead her on an incredible journey that would result in her becoming only the 7th person ever to be convicted of treason in the United States.
As we will find out why here in just a moment, I don't really believe that this should have been considered a treasonous person. As a matter of fact, this case is actually going to bring into question what treason really is, and if it is a black or white, yes or no, good or bad thing. Like we mentioned in last week's episode, there's not always a black and white answer. There is a lot of gray area in life.
Iva's life changed course during the summer of 1941, when her family sent her to Tokyo to care for an aunt who had fallen seriously ill. However, with the world descending into war, this proved to be an inopportune time for international travel. Relations between Japan and the United States were deteriorating at an alarming rate, and sensing trouble was on the horizon, Iva attempted to return home. However, a problem with her travel documents delayed her departure, and with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941, she found herself stranded in Japan, a country she hardly knew.
Though of Japanese descent, she had been raised her whole life under the American lifestyle.
She was immediately approached by Japanese officials who tried to pressure her into renouncing her US citizenship and swear allegiance to Japan, a route several other Americans stranded in Japan took. However, Iva refused and was therefore classified as an enemy alien and denied a war ration card. She was now in an extremely precarious situation, unable to receive financial support from her parents in the US who had been placed in internment camps, and forced to leave her aunt's home following a campaign of harassment from suspicious neighbours who were concerned that an American spy might be living amongst them.
Now, I love the fact that she refused to renounce her American citizenship, but as we'll see as the story goes, it really gets kind of twisted.
Desperate for some means to support herself, Iva moved to Tokyo, where she eventually found work as a typist at Radio Tokyo, the station which produced a 75-minute-long propaganda show entitled The 0 Hour, a show broadcast to Allied soldiers stationed in the Pacific, which was intended to demoralize and intimidate the men listening. Allied troops would be taunted with stories of their imminent attack and death, and given details of military losses nearby, while the sultry-voiced female broadcaster would remind them that their sweethearts back home were likely to be seeking comfort in the arms of another man. These various female broadcasters were given the collective name of Tokyo Rose by the soldiers listening to the radio shows, and it would not be long before the voice of Iva Togori would be counted amongst Tokyo Rose's many personas.
So she has been forced into this position where she has to be this voice of Radio Tokyo, the voice of Tokyo Rose, if you will, that is supposed to be demoralizing the troops and trying to psychologically damage them, right?
After joining Radio Tokyo, Iva was quickly recruited by one of the show's producers, an Australian military officer named Major Charles Cousins, who had been captured earlier in the war and been forced to work on the 0 Hour. Despite working on enemy propaganda, the Major had done his best to sabotage the broadcast by inserting jokes and double meanings into the script, and saw in Iva the perfect opportunity to further diminish the effectiveness of the propaganda due to her rough and somewhat masculine voice, the complete opposite of the feminine and seductive voices favoured by other radio propaganda shows during the war.
Which brings into question the question of whether or not the Major was treasonous towards Japan, right? He was sabotaging the show for America, and he was using Iva to do just that, to help sabotage the propaganda going on against the American soldiers. So at what point is it treason? Was it treason and sabotage against the Japanese, or is it treason to the American people and American soldiers? This case gets very, very gray in areas.
Together the two did what they could to undermine the show's effectiveness, using intricacies in the English language that went over the heads of their Japanese handlers, while doing everything that they could to make its message as ridiculous as possible, so that the Allied soldiers listening would know that everything being said was untrue. Nevertheless, Iva Togori found her name linked to the myth of Tokyo Rose, and when the war ended, the American public were hungry for more information on the woman behind the voice. When a US journalist in Japan put out word that he was prepared to offer $2,000 for an exclusive interview with the real Tokyo Rose, Iva stepped forward, unable to pass up the golden opportunity to earn some desperately needed cash. However, the offer was a trap, and Iva was instead arrested by the FBI on September 5th, 1945, only to be released after spending a year in prison due to no evidence against her being found. Yet the tale did not end there, and when Iva tried to return to US soil, powerful individuals whipped up anti-Japanese sentiment amongst the American public, resulting in Iva being arrested once again, accused of being the real Tokyo Rose, and subsequently charged with treason.
And again, I don't believe that that was actually right to charge this lady with treason, considering she was in a precarious position that was already the fault of the U.S. government, at least to some degree, anyway. So what do you guys think? Do you think she should have been charged with treason and actually found guilty nonetheless? Go ahead, put a 1 in the chat room if you think yes, she was absolutely in the wrong and she deserved what she got. Put a 2 in the chat room if you think no, she was a victim of really bad circumstances and should have been not held accountable for what she had to endure, or put a 3 in the chat room if you're not quite sure either way on this case, whether she was innocent or guilty.
Her 3-month-long trial in 1949 was the most expensive in US history up until that point, and resulted in her being convicted on 1 of 8 counts of treason, despite Iva denying any disloyalty to the US, and prosecutors failing to present a single radio broadcast as evidence against her. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison and fined $10,000 before eventually being released after serving 6 years, yet it later emerged that key witness testimonies against her were false and had been coerced by prosecutors, resulting in her conviction being overturned and a presidential pardon being issued 20 years later. Ivor lived out her remaining years in the US before dying in 2006.
Personally, I don't think she should have been convicted, though the conviction was overturned. I don't think she should have been convicted of it to begin with. This sounds like a railroad trial to me, but let's see what you guys had to say about it. Remember, it was 1, if you think she is absolutely guilty of treason, 2, if you think she's a victim of bad circumstance, and 3, if you just don't know. Let's see what you guys had to say. It looks like we've got over in the DarkWolf's Den Show somebody playing around online. If my mods would go ahead and take care of that small issue over there, I would very much appreciate it. JoJo's says 2222, absolutely innocent, a victim of circumstance. My Life DIY with the 2s, also saying a victim of circumstance. I have to agree that's kind of where I stand on that. Over here in the rippinrabbithole.com, we've got Maggie says, charge Tokyo Rose, but Vomit and Clintons are free. I know, right? I appreciate that over there in the DWD show. Maggie's Aces, Hi Earth. Hey Earth Daughter, glad to see you here. Do you have a note? Sandy B says 3, not really sure, not totally guilty. That's fair, Sandy B. Raider Champion 3.4, not quite sure. Also, either way. Earth Daughter 2 or 3. So probably a victim of circumstance, not really sure, but more likely than not a victim of circumstance. I will give you that. Errol Taylor 2s across the board, as well as Maggie's Ace with 2s across the board. So again, I am in full agreement. I think this should not have been even a treasonous trial. It goes to show a lot of gray area once again, but I don't think she should have been charged with this, as she did what she could to survive. She even refused, if you remember, to denounce her citizenship, was truly patriotic the whole way through. Definitely something that should not have happened. It seems like in the end the courts were more treasonous than the person that they were charging. Our next treacherously treasonous traitor is a well-known American traitor. No, not Obama or Hillary. Both of those quite well qualify. No, this is a traitor that goes back to the very beginning of the United States of America.
3. Benedict Arnold. During the American Revolutionary War, Arnold established himself as a soldier of intellect and courage, so much so that he was promoted to the rank of general for the Americans. However, discontent with his status in the military and with the political decisions of the U.S., he began negotiating secretly with the British and decided that he would turn over the fort at West Point that was under his command to British troops. The plot was discovered and foiled, and Arnold narrowly escaped arrest. Publicly switching loyalty, he continued to fight against the Americans during the rest of the war.
Interestingly enough, just 5 days ago, there was an article published in the Gateway Pundit that mentioned the treasonous treachery of Benedict Arnold, as well as a number of Benedict Arnold's character flaws that led him to his treacherous acts. These are actually laid out in the book American Revolution, Volume 2 by Nathaniel Philbrick. These are the treacherous traits of Benedict Arnold. Never worried about the consequences of his actions. Guilt was simply not a part of his makeup. Next, rules were made to be broken. Arnold did whatever Arnold wanted. Sounds like the other Arnold we got around now. He presented his national interest as the nearest in his heart and the first in his wishes, end quote, even as he disclosed military secrets to the enemy. It's a wanton hypocrisy by a public official. Oh, you mean like when Hillary and Obama do that? What he was doing was first and foremost for money. He priced his soul for 10,000 pounds. Again, like we've seen in recent times. He was magnificent in his fearless and pugnacious pride and arrogance. I'm sure that he would give a devilish smirk in tearing up a State of the Union address like dirty, crooked, corrupted, treacherously treasonous Nancy Pelosi. Not a fan of her. Next character flaw of Benedict Arnold, he attacked the integrity of his accusers by innuendo and insinuations. He claimed his accusers were not patriots and he was the genuine hero. Amazing projection of his evil onto others. Once again, we seen a projection of all the evils of the... Let's be honest, it was the evils of Hillary and the Democratic Party being projected onto the last sitting president. He thought he could serve his country best by being a traitor, delusional fantasy, ignoring facts. Arnold justified his treason by saying he loved his country. Quote, I have never acted from a principle of love to my country. Or I have ever acted from a principle of love to my country, The same principle of love to my country actuates my present conduct, end quote. He promised retaliatory killing of epic proportions unless his ultimatums were followed. He displayed an amazing tenacity to sacrifice country for self-ambition. Once again, sounds like Hillary and Obama, both willing to absolutely sacrifice their own country and their own position for selfish ambitions. His decision to sell his loyalty to the highest bidder was rooted in self-serving opportunism masquerading as patriotism. Gotta be careful when these other side of the fence talks about patriotism and their use of these terms against the American people, like calling what we have in this country a democracy all the time, when clearly we are in a republic, but Democrats will always say that we are threatening their democracy, which I'm sure that a republic does threaten the democracy of traitors. But once again, that is from the Gateway Pundit, that list of character flaws of Benedict Arnold, the first of many traitors to this country, and one more of which we may see exposed soon. But, well, we've already seen exposed over the last year, but you guys know what I mean. But we have to go ahead and take a network break right here, folks. So my name's Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and you're listening to the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show Freedom Flame series, Treacherously Treasonous Traitors, on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com. We'll be right back with a second.
Is their only sure defense.
In 1854, men, women, and children walked into this little white schoolhouse in Ripon, Wisconsin, divided. When they emerged, they were united in freedom. This year, on March 20th, Ripon Rabbit Hole and thefreedomflame.com will rekindle the spirit that keeps the flame alive in our annual celebration. We invite everyone, regardless of your political affiliation or location in the world, to join us in this year's celebration.
May the light of freedom, coming to all darkened lands, flame bright, until at last the darkness is no more.
Register now for event details at thefreedomflame.com. Everyone, it's AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Are you enjoying tonight's Darkwolf's Den Radio Show Freedom Flame series for Treacherously Treasonous Traitors? I know I am. If you are and you haven't done so already, please make sure to stick your thumb up in the air. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, you can use a finger. If you haven't done so already, hop on over to our website, rippinrabbithole.com. That's RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. There you can sign up for your exclusive backstage VIP pass. It's going to give you unfiltered access down the rabbit hole to where the conversation continues after the show. I'll be back again tomorrow night, Friday night. Come along with me as we dive deep down the rabbit hole of Lincoln's secret meetings. That's right, I'm talking about Honest Abe, Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president of the United States of America, and the secret meetings held in the White House while he was president. You won't want to miss a moment of it. Tomorrow night, Friday, February 25th, starts at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as all shows do. Then Saturday night, let's take a trip along the Underground Railroad. A fascinating look in theories why there isn't any maps showing the Underground Railroad traveling through Wisconsin when we know we have historic proof and fact. Indeed, it did travel through Wisconsin. So that's Saturday, February 26th. Then we'll end out the weekend right together with you Sunday night, February 27th. Again, starts at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as all shows do. We'll look at the fascinating rabbit hole of military magic and deceptive illusions designed to fool the audience in the theater of war. It's a very important topic, especially considering where we are in February 2022. Regarding the end of February, that means the beginning of March, and you know what that means. The first Tuesday of every month is Tuesday Night Videos, and it happens to be the first day of the month. That's right, Tuesday, March 1st. Join your host, Raider Champion, in the Backstage VIP Lounge, again at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. It happens exclusively on ripinrabbithole.com in our Backstage 24/7 Lounge, Tuesday, March 1st, an evening and a night, I should say, with Elvis, exploring music and videos from the king of rock and roll, plus music trivia, followed by open requests. It's going to be a fun Tuesday for sure. We'll return back to Jerry Hicks and the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, February 24th. You're listening to the Ripin' Common Sense Radio Network, the Ripin' Rabbit Hole, home of the Freedom Flame.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the DarkWolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And welcome back to the second half of the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, February 24th, 2022. This is, of course, the Freedom Flame series. Treacherously Treasonous Traitors is our topic tonight, and we've already covered a number of the treasonous traitors in history, and we're just getting started. We, at the end of last segment, talked about an American traitor named Benedict Arnold and the character flaws that very well led him and a number of others across time to commit treason against this country, but he's definitely not the last, albeit he is the first, but not the last to commit treason in America.
Aldrich Ames.
It amounted really to kind of greed and folly. Simple as that.
Until the mid-1980s, heavy drinking, extramarital affairs, and usually mediocre performance at work were the most serious transgressions of this former counterintelligence officer and analyst. But between 1985 and his arrest in 1994, he earned over $4.5 million by releasing sensitive counterintelligence information to Russia and the Soviet Union.
Now, regardless of what country the information gets released to, I think we can all agree that selling information to another country, especially about the agents and their placements, being a counterintelligence officer, is definitely a treacherously treasonous crime of being a traitor.
That allowed him to buy a $500,000 home cash, drive a Jaguar, dress in $1,500 Italian suits, and that this new affluence just happened to coincide with the loss of America's most valuable spies inside the Soviet Union.
AIM's information exchange included the names of practically every American spy in operation against them.
It is impossible to overestimate the amount of the damage or the consequences or our own surprise.
Clearly a member of the deep state. They gave every bit of information on every spy we had in the country of Russia to Russia.
His treasonous actions compromised more than 100 intelligence operations and contributed to the deaths of at least 10 American agents. He's currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
What I did to those men, the situation of their families and others, and the kind of shame and the kind of remorse that I feel is something that is and I think always will be intensely personal.
And remember, this was during the Cold War, so this was more likely than not an operative of the deep state. As a matter of fact, I would definitely say if they weren't an operative, they were definitely a supporter. Anybody who isn't a patriot is definitely deep state. You kind of fall on one of two sides. You love your country or you hate it, right? But folks, speaking of wars, from the Cold War to World War II, we all know Hitler was a horrible person. That's not even a question nowadays. We know just how bad Hitler was and all the damage that he caused. But if you were a German soldier and you had the opportunity to kill Hitler, would that be a treasonous act if it would end the war and save many more people? Again, we have a very gray area coming up in our next story.
Klaus Von Staffenberg. Born into one of the oldest and most respected families of the German aristocracy, raised in a castle, a member of the Prussian military elite, and a wealthy man with status, respect, and everything to lose, Klaus von Staffenberg seems like an unlikely candidate for high treason. However, he would find himself the leading figure in the most famous plot against Adolf Hitler's life, when on the 20th of July 1944, he came within a hair's breadth of killing the Führer, toppling the Nazi government, and perhaps changing the course of the Second World War and maybe even the history of the world. However, a series of unlikely random events and sheer bad luck would ultimately lead to his failure and ruin.
Even though this is not a paranormal show, this does bring into question time travel. Why? Because the classic example of time travel is going back and killing Hitler, right? Saving a lot of lives and ending the war. However, it's been brought into question whether or not one could change history if that be the case. And with this random set of events, this seems to me like a time-locked event or something that had to happen, World War II and the Holocaust and all that. As we're going to find, this series of bad luck was almost like the universe itself stopping anything from stopping what was happening.
Yet while on the surface it might seem as though the man himself was nothing short of a hero for being one of the few men with the courage to take action against Hitler and his regime, the truth, as always in life, is far more complicated and murky.
Like we mentioned in the first half, when it comes to treason, not everything is black and white and clear cut.
With the outbreak of war in 1939, Staffenberg participated in the German invasion of Poland, approving of and indeed actively supporting the occupation of Polish land and the enslavement of its people, sharing the widespread belief amongst the German nobility that Polish land rightfully belonged to Germany and that Polish resources and citizens should be used to achieve greater German prosperity. When the German war machine turned west, once again Staffenberg found himself in the thick of the action, his unit taking part in the Battle of France, where he served with distinction, winning the Iron Cross and finding himself impressed by the incredible string of unlikely military victories Hitler had won for the German people. Yet this initial enthusiasm towards Hitler and the Nazi regime began to wane, and by 1942 he began whispering of treason, joining other like-minded officers who were actively conspiring against their leader, having witnessed the wanton cruelty and criminal behavior being unleashed on the Eastern Front, as well as the growing recklessness shown by Hitler in military matters, which made it clear that he was not the genius he might have seemed during the opening years of the war.
And it brings into question, is it wrong to commit treason against a dictator for the better good of the people?
Yet such conspiracies failed to materialize into action, and while fighting in North Africa in 1943, Staffenberg suffered terrible injuries during an air raid, losing his right hand, his left eye, and 2 fingers on his remaining left hand. It was while recovering that he was once again approached by a group of conspirators who wanted to kill Hitler and topple the Nazi government. Staffenberg became the driving force behind the plot, and with his posting to the headquarters of the Reserve Army, found himself given the perfect opportunity to set his treasonous thoughts into motion by corrupting a pre-existing plan that had already been approved by the Führer himself. Codenamed Operation Valkyrie, this contingency plan detailed actions to be taken in the event of civil unrest threatening internal security in Germany. However, Staffenberg and his fellow plotters secretly modified the plan with the intention of using the Reserve Army to seize control of German cities, disarm and neutralize the SS, and arrest members of the government following the assassination of Hitler.
Again, is it wrong to use such means to take down a horrible criminal?
It was imperative that Hitler be killed to free German soldiers from their oath of loyalty to him and ensure that they followed the conspirators' traitorous orders which were coming from a legitimate and seemingly legal source via Staffenberg at the Reserve Army High Command. Yet while the plan itself was well thought out, its execution was rushed and fraught with danger. General Helmut Steiff was penciled in as the man due to kill Hitler. However, when the general pulled out, Staffenberg was the only conspirator who had regular access to Hitler and was therefore left with the burden of not only taking out the most powerful man in Europe, but also rushing back to Berlin on the same day to oversee the Reserve Army's seizure of power and ensure Operation Valkyrie's smooth running. However, Staffenberg was no fool and realized that the probability of success was low, yet it was decided that the plan must proceed regardless, so that even in failure, the world would know that not all Germans supported and approved of the actions taken by the Nazi regime. On the 20th of July 1944, his chance to strike finally came when a meeting was called at the Wolf's lair. Staffenberg brought with him a briefcase bomb designed to wipe out all those attending, including Hitler. However, from the get-go, fate seemed to be against him.
As I mentioned a moment ago, and we're going to find here now, it seems like the universe itself was bound and determined to stop this plot from continuing.
The meeting location had been changed from a subterranean bunker to a wooden barracks with all of the windows open due to extremely hot weather. This was a major problem, as the bunker would have greatly magnified the force of the blast, ensuring that all those inside stood no chance of surviving. However, the open-windowed barracks meant that the explosion was time-consuming by his injuries, and when a guard disturbed his preparations, Staffenberg was forced to enter the meeting with only one of the bombs primed for use. He placed his deadly briefcase under the conference table as close as he could to Hitler before making his excuses and leaving the room.
So this guy has already been through a ton. He tried to arm the bombs, only got one of them armed because of his injuries and being interrupted. And now with that armed bomb, he's got it right next to Hitler. Things are going so close to according to plan. However, fate has this funny way, and the universe itself has this funny way of changing things at the last minute.
However, shortly after his departure, another officer moved the briefcase out of the way and placed it behind the solid oak conference table leg, which shielded Hitler from the full force of the blast, resulting in him suffering just minor injuries, with only 4 attendees killed. Staffenberg rushed back to Berlin to commence the second stage of the operation, the military coup against the Nazi leadership. However, with Hitler still alive, the plan was doomed to failure. Joseph Goebbels used radio broadcasts to announce that Hitler had survived, and when the Führer himself personally spoke on state radio shortly after, it was clear that the conspiracy was over. The traitors were quickly rounded up and executed, with Staffenberg facing the firing squad after speaking his last words, which are said to have been, "Long live our sacred Germany." Hitler took advantage of the failed plot to root out and destroy anyone he suspected might oppose him in the future, and over 20,000 Germans would be executed or sent to concentration camps in the brutal purge that followed.
So this guy did his best to end Hitler and end the Nazi regime for good, basically, and in the war altogether, and in his treasonous acts he failed miserably and paid the price of a traitor, which is death, of course.
Number 5. Guy Fawkes.
I know his name was Guy Fawkes, and I know in 1605 he attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. But who was he really?
Born in York and raised an Anglican, Fox converted to Catholicism relatively early in life and developed anti-Protestant sympathies. It wasn't long before he found a like-minded group of conspirators looking to assassinate King James I and restore Catholicism as the religion of the land. He became a key figure in the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, which sought to blow up English Parliament. Fox was charged with safeguarding the explosives, which had been amassed in the cellar beneath the House of Lords. However, he was captured and tortured, eventually dying on January 31st the following year. Every November 5th, England celebrates Guy Fawkes Day with a bonfire and a burning in effigy of the notorious traitor.
Another incredibly well-known traitor there, Mr. Guy Fawkes. And so far, we've heard plots against leaders of different countries, but what about a plot by the leader of a country? We know that has happened in recent times in a country we all know and love very much, that the person being put in power wasn't exactly what they were supposed to be, or even supposed to be in power, in my opinion. But it's not, again, the first time in history where there has been a traitorous leader. We know Trudeau recently became a traitor to the people of Canada, beating down a protest for freedom in the sake of authoritarianism and not allowing the restrictions that have been placed upon the people of Canada to be lifted, as was requested by the people that just wanted to have their freedoms and their voice heard. But again, there's not the only leader to have turned against their people.
Benito Mussolini.
By the way, of course, I can't mention Justin Trudeau without saying honk honk.
Ed allora che comincia la storia d'Italia.
Prior to 1914, this Italian political journalist was one of the most prominent members of the Italian Socialist Party. However, in 1914, at the outset of World War I, he publicly denounced socialism, turned his back on the working class, and introduced the fascist movement in Italy. In 1922, in the midst of protests in his country, King Victor Emmanuel III handed power over to Mussolini in an effort to avoid civil war. Now Prime Minister, it wasn't long before Mussolini transformed the government into a dictatorship. Il Duce, or the leader as he was called, became known for his tyranny and for his support of the Nazi regime in Germany.
It just goes to show that it's not hard to turn what once was a free-loving and peaceful country into a war zone and something that the people do not want. He literally dissolved the government and became a dictator when he had promised the people that he would absolutely not do that. Again, just like the dictator Trudeau that is doing his best to ruin people's lives, even though he was voted in on a platform completely different. Unfortunately, nowadays we know the main traitor is the World Economic Forum, as well as George Soros, who shows no allegiance to any country, and as a matter of fact, use their policies to destroy countries and hurt their people. Folks, that's right, the World Economic Forum is one of the biggest traitors in today's society, and any government that follows their policies and does business with them are, if nothing else by proxy, traitors. But folks, that music means we have no time left for tonight's show, so what do you guys think of these treacherously treasonous traitors? Is the crime of being a traitor always a black and white yes or no question? Or is there sometimes gray areas? Is it wrong to be a traitor to a criminal? So many questions, so little time. I guess in the end, all we can do is look at the evidence, apply a little common sense, and you be the judge. we got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, February 24th, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the den may be closing, but don't you worry. We've got the weekend kicked off right, and the weekend fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back tomorrow, Friday, February 25th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as our buddy AJ the Rippin' Rabbit takes back to the airwaves with an all-new episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. That's right, tomorrow he's going to be discussing Lincoln's secret meetings. This seems like a very intriguing topic to me because I don't really know nothing about them, so I cannot wait to hear what he has to present about Abraham Lincoln and the meetings that were apparently kept secret for a long time. That's coming up tomorrow, Friday, February 25th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com. Then on Saturday, February 26th, 2022, on the rippinrabbithole.com, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, our buddy AJ the Rippin' Rabbit comes back with yet another episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show as he discusses the Underground Railroad, yet another iconic piece of history, and one that begs a question: why was Wisconsin not on the map of the Underground Railroad, as there's evidence now that it very much was involved? Very interesting discussion, very interesting information coming up on Saturday night, February 26th, 2022. Then on Sunday, February 27th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, AJ rounds the weekend out right with you as he discusses military magic. So much illusion and deception and look over here, not over there. So many different magic tricks that are actually used by the military, especially in wartime. Deceit and deception has its place in war, as we know, and the elements of magic and illusion definitely have their place in military, and AJ is going to discuss that connection on Sunday, February 27th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then make sure you come back on Tuesday, because the weekend doesn't end this weekend on Sunday, or maybe the next week starts early on Tuesday. I'm not quite sure, but either way, our buddy Raider Champion will be hosting Tuesday night videos in the Backstage Lounge. This go round is going to be the topic of Elvis. The king has left the building. That's right. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, will be the focus of the Tuesday night trivia video show, as our buddy Raider Champion does a great job of presiding over that show, and really always a great time. Make sure you come back and check that out, but that's exclusive to the Backstage Lounge. That is not a radio broadcast show. If you would like to join and become the winner of the Tuesday night videos, as I have done before myself, make sure you go over to the rippinrabbithole.com. That is rippinrabbithole.com. You're going to have to sign up for your Backstage Pass. That's going to allow you access to all the rest of the site, and it is free, always will be, and always has been. With that, you can go into the Backstage 24/7 Lounge and join us on Tuesday, March 1st, 2022 at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central for Tuesday night videos. The more people that's there, the more fun it is. It is such a blast. I'm telling you guys, make sure you come on back and check it out yourself while you're on the rippinrabbithole.com. Also, make sure you drop Down the Rabbit Hole. That is our exclusive social media section. We don't shadow ban. We don't do any of those dirty tricks like Facebook and the rest of those commie platforms. With that said, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and on behalf of AJ the Rippin' Rabbit, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musko, Walt House, everyone involved with Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, and Tom Baillies for this amazing music. On behalf of these folks, I'm Jerry Hicks. You're listening to the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show Freedom Flame Series, Treasonously Treacherous Traitors on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com. Until next time, remember, stay awake, but dare to dream. Good night, everybody. How? Yeah, that's right. Honk, honk.
Freedom is their only sure defense.
In 1854, men, women, and children walked into this little white schoolhouse in Ripon, Wisconsin, divided. When they emerged, they were united. United in freedom. This year on March 20th, Ripon Rabbit Hole and thefreedomflame.com will rekindle the spirit that keeps the flame alive in our annual celebration. We invite everyone, regardless of your political affiliation or location in the world, to join us in this year's celebration.
May the light of freedom, coming to all darkened lands, flame brightly, until at last the darkness is no more.
Register now for event details at thefreedomflame.com.
Apparently I had forgotten to turn that one on. Let's go, Brandon.
Honk, honk. Is it in
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Honk, honk, honk.
Honk, honk, honk.
Let's go, Brandon.
Honk, honk, honk.
Let's go, Brandon.
T, T, T.
No, honk, honk, honk.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. Honk, honk, honk. Let's go, Brandon. Honk, honk, honk. Honk, honk, honk. Let's go, Brandon. Honk, honk, honk. Let's go, Brandon.
Or just illusion, manifestation, or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
it's not TTT, it's honk.
I made that.
Honk. Well, it doesn't mean anything. It's got to mean something like, let's go, Brandon. Honk, honk, honk. It means we support the truckers for freedom.
Let's go, Brandon.
Well, that's what honk, honk, honk means.
Yeah, but you can just say that.
But that's too much words. People know what you mean when you say honk, honk.
Yes.
Right, guys? Honk, honk.
Honk. Honk, honk, honk.
Let's go, Brandon.
Honk, honk, honk.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here for tonight. It has been an amazing week. Come back for AJ the Rippin' Rabbit Friday through Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10, 9 Central on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. Until then, have a wonderful rest of the night, guys. Bye now. Let's go, Brandon.